Today we're listing the best 8 transformation quirks that exist in My Hero Academia, and at the end I'll let you know which of them I rank in my top 3. For those of you who are unsure, transformations are one of 3 types of quirks that exist in My Hero Academia. They essentially allow the user to alter their body in some way, with an obvious example being Kirishima's hardening, and that's kind of my subtle way of letting you guys know that he's not on this list. But before we begin, thank you all for getting the channel to 40,000 subscribers. Less than 2 months ago we didn't even have 1,000 subscribers, so I'm incredibly grateful, and I hope it inspires any one of you watching to keep going at what you love, because eventually you will improve and see the results that you want. But with that out of the way, let's get into the video. So at 8th place on this list, we have the quirk known as MEATBALL, which is possessed by a second year student at Shiketsu High. Now we first saw this quirk in season 3 during the provisional license exam, and it really stands out for a lot of gross but very powerful ways. At its most basic, MEATBALL allows the user to manipulate their own flesh and separate it from their body. The user can then control the flesh with telekinesis. And as we see from these clips, he can warp them into different shapes that fit specific needs and also use them as projectiles. And while Bakugo was able to destroy the balls of flesh pretty easily, this quirk has another ability that makes it just the worst. Once the flesh makes contact with someone, the person is then rolled down into a ball of meat from which they can't actually escape, at least not by themselves. We saw this power used on Kirishima and Bakugo and a bunch of other innocent victims, and what's worse is that the people inside these balls of flesh can still feel pain, but like I said, they don't have any means of escaping, so it's pretty brutal. We gotta be thankful that this power isn't possessed by a villain. I mean, could you imagine what All For One would have done to All Might if he could turn him into one of these things? The quirk is arguably one of the most versatile transformations, as the flesh can be used for long range attacks and for defense, or just to immobilize opponents. And as we saw during the show, using the telekinesis, you can kind of like send off one piece of flesh to do its own thing, and then it can catch enemies by surprise from behind. The main drawback is that people inside these balls of flesh will be released if the user takes enough damage. And one final thing on this, the user of this quirk is called Seji, and unsurprisingly his name contains the kanji for flesh. He's also very annoying. Now in 7th place we have the quirk known as Black, and this is honestly one of my favorite transformations. This quirk allows the user to merge their body into anything that is dark colored, regardless of the size or the mass. So Vantablack, which is the hero name of the student who has this quirk, he could merge into something as tiny as a fly and control its movements, or he could merge into something massive like the pyramids at nighttime. I don't know why he would ever do that, but I mean, he could. The only downside that I can see is that once the light turns on, Vantablack is forcibly ejected from whatever he's hiding in. But still, this quirk has crazy stealth potential, as you can literally hide in the shadows and then ambush people. Like, people say they hide in the shadows as a metaphor, but no, this guy can literally hide in them. And if you want to infiltrate a secure location, say the Shihisaikai base for example, you could just merge yourself into someone's shoes or their jeans or whatever. We'll be seeing this quirk animated in season 5, and I honestly cannot wait. Now moving on to 6th place, we have Permeation. And this is a quirk that you should all be pretty familiar with by now. This quirk was possessed by Mirio, but the only person who has it right now is probably Mirio's dad. Permeation gives the user the ability to phase through matter, and as we've previously seen, Mirio mastered this quirk to be able to phase both his entire body or just individual parts. In this clip, we see him phasing his hand through Overhaul's palm, and then whilst the rest of his arm is still phased, his fist becomes tangible again and whacks Overhaul in the face. This is truly one of the most unbeatable quirks ever created, because whilst the user is intangible, you literally can't do any damage. The only time you can get them is when their quirk is not activated. Also, we saw that Mirio has a technique in which he permeates his entire body and then falls through the ground, only to be repelled upwards at high speeds when he turns off his quirk. This is what he used to defeat Class 1A single-handedly, whilst butt naked I might add. By applying the power in this way, this quirk can be used as a form of teleportation, in addition to making the user essentially invincible if used correctly. The main drawback of this quirk is that the user's primary senses don't work because everything just passes through them. What that means in practice is that when Mirio permeates his entire body, he's unable to see anything or hear anything. And that's a pretty big deal, but as we've seen, with proper mastery of this power, it becomes one of the best quirks out there, and the whole not being able to see thing, it kind of becomes irrelevant. Aizawa said that even as a student, Mirio was closer to being #1 hero than most professionals. So yeah, you can imagine that this quirk is pretty damn good. Now moving on to 5th place, we have the quirk known as Muscle Augmentation, which we saw used by Muscular in season 3. So this quirk allows the person to increase the size of their muscles until they can't even be contained by the person's skin. Now this gives the user a ridiculous amount of power, speed and durability. And yes, while Muscular was defeated by a 14-year-old high school kid, You gotta remember guys, Deku has one very important thing, and that my friends is called plot armor. Muscular was able to withstand the strength of a 100% Detroit Smash, which is literally All Might levels of power. So if you want to talk about raw strength, then this transformation right here is elite. We also saw it used by another character in the manga, but that will be explained in my Pro Hero arc review that's coming out within like 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, so at 4th place, we have a quirk that has only ever been seen in the manga so far, so if you want to avoid any spoilers for what is likely to be the second half of Season 5, then pause this video and skip to the timestamp on screen. This character hasn't been seen in any capacity before, so if you've not read the manga then you won't know who he is. But if you really don't mind, at 4th place we have the quirk known as Stress, which is possessed by Re-Destro. This allows the user to store up their stress over a period of time and then convert that into raw power. Now in practice, this gives the user gigantification and unbelievable strength and speed. So Re-Destro used this quirk to gigantify his arm and then wipe out a bunch of League of Villain clones in one hit. When he reaches over 80% of his power, his body gets even bigger and gets covered with this black energy. And if you look at all the damage this caused, I mean, it's pretty impressive, you can't deny that. The downside to this quirk is that in order to use it, you have to build up a lot of stress, which probably isn't healthy. And if you're not building stress, then you're not really doing anything to help your quirk. Then again, many of us are pretty stressed regardless and can't transform into gigantic monsters. So I guess it's a useful way of using your stress, I guess. And when he reaches 100%, he can discharge black waves of raw energy from both of his hands. So against a normal opponent whose name isn't Shigaraki, this would definitely be lethal. Now in 3rd place we have a tie because these quirks are very similar. So to start with, if you saw my video explaining Gigantomachia's multiple quirks, which I recommend you check out as well, then you'll know that one of his abilities is that his body grows physically larger the more he fights. When we look at this ability in isolation and disregard his other quirks, it's a pretty useful ability, but I feel like this quirk is so great because Gigantomachia is the one that has it. If you take him out of the equation and give this same ability to, I don't know, Principal Nezu, he's not going to last very long because at the very start of the fight, you could just take him out in one hit. Now the reason Gigantomachia is tied is because once I thought about it, I realized that this power to grow bigger the more you fight is basically a harder to activate version of Mount Lady's quirk. I mean, she can transform pretty big and she doesn't really need to do all of that. The only reason I didn't feel comfortable putting her above him is because we all know that Gigantomachia would end her quicker than you could say power! Now just quickly before we move on to the number 2 spot, I'm releasing this 15% off discount code on all the merch for this channel to celebrate hitting 40,000 subscribers. The code will last for 1 week after I post this video, so do be sure to use it while you can. Okay, so at 2nd place on this list, we have the quirk known as FOLDABODY, which is possessed by the new number 4 pro hero, Edgeshot. This transformation quirk allows him to control the thinness of his body, even going so far as to make his body as flat as a sheet of paper. Where have I seen this before? He can also transform different sections of his body at will, as we see in this clip here. Edgeshot can use this quirk so precisely that he can cut off the blood flow to people's brains so that they almost instantly lose consciousness, which is what he did to Kurogiri. As you can imagine, this quirk is great for passing through tight spaces and also for infiltrating places that other heroes can't get into. And on top of that, Edgeshot is so fast that he can transform faster than the speed of sound. We saw during the battle at Kamino that FOLDABODY could be used to shoot the user into the air by transforming their body into this thin drill type shape. And I don't exactly know how it works, but let's just go with it. His technique is actually rated a 5 out of 6 in the Ultra Analysis book, so it's implied that his usage of this quirk can get even better. But with that said, the last quirk on this list is Manifest. Now this quirk is possessed by Tamaki Amajiki, and it allows the user to transform their limbs into the chosen characteristics of anything they eat. And this is shown to include non-edible things like crystals. So in theory, he can copy the quirks of other people, but in order to do that, he kind of has to take a bite out of them, which Tamaki personally wouldn't do too often. Nearly anything you eat is going to have some kind of potential benefit, whether it's an entire swordfish or a clam or tentacles or wings from a chicken. I'd be really interested to see if he can use those wings to actually fly through the sky like Hawks does. That would be pretty cool. And I don't know if you guys have seen the clips yet, but I got to play One's Justice 2 at Bandai Namco, and when I was there, Tamaki did have an ability that allowed him to fly properly with these wings. But yeah, the main drawback of this quirk is that in order to activate it, the food has to still be in the user's digestive system, which means that if they're captured, obviously, you know, if you're captured and you don't have access to food, then you're pretty screwed. But finally, we've listed all the quirks that were worthy of a space on this list, so now I'm going to tell you my top 3. So at third place, I have Meatball. As I already said, it's a really versatile quirk, especially as far as transformation quirks go. The person using it can take out a lot of other people simultaneously, and if you hit someone who's stronger than you, such as, I don't know, All For One or Gigantomachia, if you hit them with this thing, then people who look unbeatable, you can actually take them out quite easily. The silver medal goes to muscle augmentation. The power this quirk gives you is incredible, and yes, while a user with Meatball could in theory very easily defeat a person with muscle augmentation, remember that this quirk gives the user super speed as well, so as long as they see the meat, they can avoid it pretty quickly. If anything, this muscle augmentation quirk is just an uglier version of One For All. If you think about it, it kind of is. And in the number one spot, the gold medal, the best transformation quirk that exists in My Hero Academia. Now you guys probably could have guessed this already just from how much I was hyping it up, but my personal favorite and the one that I think is undoubtedly the best is Permeation. What is there to say about this quirk that hasn't already been said? The user is genuinely untouchable. A quirk that means you can't be touched is a quirk that also means you can't be beat, except by maybe Professor Aizawa. But even if you use that argument, I mean the only way Aizawa could beat him is by turning off his quirk. So the fact is, as long as this quirk is on, as long as it's activated, you can't beat the person. Every other quirk that exists is useless against a guy who can become intangible at will. So I gotta give the number one spot to Permeation here. But there you have it, guys. That was my list of the top 8 transformation quirks. If you like this video, then be sure to subscribe and share this around, as I'm aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of March. See you next week. Peace out.